Welcome to this week's edition of What's Going On Here. We're still talking railroads, and Peg and I are still sitting here in the corner of the table. And we hope that you enjoyed the last two segments. We're going into segment number 3 now. And if you don't have any extra VCR tapes around, we hope you get one and you tune in the next show, which will be at 8 o'clock or maybe at 1 in the morning or tomorrow morning at 9. And we're going to give you a chance now to go get your VCR all hooked up, to call your friends and neighbors again. We don't want you to miss this railroad series. It's an awful lot of work that Peg has put into this. She has 60 pages of notes that she has put together 3 different times to make it interesting for you people. There's some more pictures here, and we're going to take a break right now while you go do that, but we'll be right here when you come back. Thanks for coming back. We're still here, and we have in front of us a whole line of pictures that I haven't seen yet, but I'm holding one right in my hand here, and we're going out of order, but this is a picture of the...
That's going to be the last one.
The last one, but I'm going to show it to you just enough, and I'm going to hide it. Calvin's going to have to start at the other end. Way at the other end.
No, the first two is the roundhouse before the roundhouse fire, and it was built in 1901. And you can see the roundhouse is a roundhouse.
And remember, that's on Chapman Street in Rouse's Point.
For ones that don't know why it's called a roundhouse, when the turntable lines up an engine, it has to go into one of those stalls. And if it was on a straight line, the front of the roundhouse on a straight line, it wouldn't line up. So they have to put it on a curve. Then the next ones is the fire. Now, the fire was May 24th, 1923, and these pictures show the fire. Different scenes of getting the engines. You can see the engines burned right in there.
You can see the curvature in this one right here. If you'll notice, that's the curvature. That building kind of swings around, right, like a half moon in the front.
And in this one, Bob has to take special notice as to what's different in that picture.
I can't see the cow catcher.
No.
You
can see the word banana.
Oh yes, I can see banana here, right over here, and we were there yesterday, but we didn't see that. And
it was to us, that's the banana house. It was rented at first when it was first built as a fruit company, like is it Lombardi in Plattsburgh?
Yes.
Just a fruit company.
Yep.
Well, this was a fruit company. But then in later years, it was only bananas that came by carloads of bananas going into Canada. So this is where they stored the bananas in the banana house. And I think you still can read banana up there. I was there not too long ago, and I think you still can see that sign.
Okay, it's just to the south of the then and the present roundhouse, that's the building beyond the roundhouse when you're standing on Chapman Street.
Yeah.
It's a stucco type building.
Yeah. And then that's another view, and then the last one you got tipped down.
Okay, but before that here, this is that turntable. You can see the engine is on the turntable here, where it was, and here's the turntable that put it in position to go into the roundhouse. And this is the new...
That's the new roundhouse.
Let me take this down, Calvin, and it's not standing up here very good. They'll think my name is Arnie Beal here. Arnie wouldn't want me to do that. There's and there's a tender that's behind its engine that has gone in, and here's another one waiting out here. These spots on the top, I believe, are if they can put. That's where they can put the exhaust, so it'll go out of the building. At least
they're vents.
They're vents.
They're vents.
Okay, those
yes.
are vents out
yes.
here. There's 7.
Yes.
There were 7 doors.
Yeah. Now that's the building that's there today.
Right.
But that's what it looked like when they built it.
These are all glass blocks on the top. And there's glass blocks on the side. It's not windows, they're glass blocks that let the light in, and all the doors are open here. And then as each of these go in, you'll see when we do our segment on the roundhouse, there is a pit underneath the engine where you can work under and work up above and work underneath the trains, or the engines, I should say, not a train. We all say train so easy. We don't mean train. We mean a car or an engine or something else.
Yes.
The whole group is called the train. Yeah. Exactly. Because I learned how to build the train the other day. Build one up and set it up. Okay, we're taking down the roundhouse. It's a thing of the past.
Now this is the D&H private car. We saw the inside of the Rutland one before. Well, this is the D&H. Now, it's over on the CN siding, next to the CN freight shed. But that was, they put it there to service it or something after the roundhouse is up. This wasn't too many years ago. And I don't really know the reason they put it there, but it was for some reason they took it to CN instead of on the D&H.
If you want to find out what a roundhouse does and how you work in there and what they do, like I say, tune into next week or the week after. We're not sure yet where they're going to fall, but you'll hear all about it. And there's a very interesting name right there.
Now that is one of the cars of the circus train. All the animals and everything all came on cars, and they came down through here. And the customs had to inspect all those cars and everything before they could go through. And they had to have a veterinarian there, and he had to check all the animals, and they had to have the right papers and all to clear the customs. And that is the last year the circus train went through. I've got pictures of the whole train, but I just brought one to show you.
What year was that?
I don't really remember.
The customs inspector has to check the mouth of each and every animal to look and see whether it says "Made in USA" inside of his mouth. It's one of the days that they do not like to work the train.
Now, just a little incident, another little story. In the early days, when the trains used to, this being geese season made me think of it, when the train used to go south, of course it was the wooden boxcars, and the geese would fly, and when they'd see the train going, of course they didn't go fast like today, the geese would all roost on the top of the train cars and would ride south on the top of the trains.
Hitchhiking. Hobos of the air.
Huh? And they'd get off and fly a while, and then they'd get back on the train and they'd ride again.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
Isn't that something else?
The railroaders used to tell about that real often. Now, you saw the Rutland newsliner in another book. Well, this is the D&H Bulletin. Now, years ago, this is what the bulletin looked like. In later years, it didn't look like that, but that was some of the earlier ones.
This is 1934. That's the waterfall in Conklinville, New York. Yeah. Don't have the slightest idea where.
They used to have beautiful pictures. But the reason I bought this from a collector too, was because of this Albert Barcomb that you see in the picture. Now, he worked for the D&H in Ross's Point, and he lived in Ross's Point, no relation. He was 6 foot 4.5 tall, and he weighed 297 pounds. In ordinary, it takes 3 men to turn an engine on a turntable, and that man did it alone. He worked at the roundhouse, and he'd turn the engine all by himself on that turntable.
And those dimensions she gave was just before he grew up, too, right?
He was born in Altona. There's the whole story of him in there, but that's just a little bit about him.
And no relative at all, no relationship.
No.
That's amazing, and it's great to have, Peg.
And this was his watch fob. You see his name is on it.
His name's on the top. It says Albert Barcomb. I got the camera on it. Night Foreman, D&H, and it's got the cross USA. It's got the cross rifles.
So I was
So you got these at different times?
Oh, yes. Sometimes you'll go to a yard sale and somebody will have a box with things in it, and you'll pick up a tag, or you'll pick up something like this. Just somebody that means nothing is tossed. And of course I scrounge, and if I see something like this, well, I get it. And this, of course, took my eye when it said Albert Barcomb. I knew right away who that was.
You already had this?
So no.
No, you didn't have that.
I knew the man. That again, I bought that from I think that man that has pipe and book in Lake Placid let me know he had that bulletin with that story of a Ross's Pointer. Right. So of course I bought it. But now you talked about 3 restaurants. I talked about Mrs. Fitch's restaurant during the snowstorm. Well, this was Mrs. Fitch's restaurant, and then it was run by the Valenzi family. 2 of the Valenzi boys ran it, and then Dorothy Beckwith ran it. That's the way it looked when Dorothy Beckwith was running it. Then Eddie Marnes, Larry Marnes' father, and someone else. I didn't have time to go through my records to find who the other one was, but 2 of those men started it again and ran it as a restaurant. And then it closed as a restaurant, and now that's Benny Arno's home.
Now, well, I'll tell you who else ran it. Doc Letourneau, Dick Letourneau's father and mother, ran there at one time. I'd been there back in the early 30s, I think, when I was related, and they had their restaurant there. and then they moved down onto the corner of Lake and Pratt, opposite the Grand Union.
Yeah, well, that's
And
where...
they were here.
That's where Richard's grandfather was a doctor. That was his home.
Okay, they did have a restaurant here. I can remember going
well,
to
that's,
this one.
that's another one.
This is the one just south of the railroad station,
yes,
right? That's
yes,
the one.
Yeah, it's a home now. It's
Yeah.
Benny Arnold's home. But
Pardon?
State Street.
It's between
it's
State.
between State and
It
Pratt.
is on State, okay.
Yeah, his door is on
Yep.
on State. But,
And the train runs right in front here.
Yeah.
I'm sure that is. I'm going to be talking with Dick. We'll
yeah,
confirm
well,
that. but
I
I'm
know
sure it is.
Eddie Marnes and another fella, two young men started in there, but I don't remember. I'm thinking Gardefee, but I'm probably wrong.
But you know, Dick Letourneau's father, Dick is a cousin of mine. We're both, my stepfather and his mother were brother and sister. And Doc Letourneau we knew so well. I used to love to go there. He was a man of magic. He'd make things disappear in front of me all the time, particularly my money when I bought a donut. Not really. I got my donuts for nothing when I went, but he was great. And the kids loved to go to see Doc.
When we were kids, they were at the corner of Pratt, like you say,
Yeah.
in the old father's homestead, and we used to stop in there by Penny Candy.
Yeah. I didn't
She
know why he
had
was
a
called
little-
Doc Letourneau. It was because his father was
His
a doctor.
father was a doctor, yes. He was a doctor for my mother went with him to be midwife for many years. She'd go with old Dr. Letourneau and deliver babies.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is quite a building. This is Ross's Point Junction. Now I don't know who the men are. That's someone maybe does. I don't. If you came in on the Rutland and you were going to get off the train and you were going to the D&H, this was the junction. There was a little waiting room in there and all, and you could either wait there for your train to come, or you could walk from there, which this building was very near the Diamond. You could walk from that building along past Bovans and on up to the D&H station to catch your other train. So, and the train stopped here. They stopped at the big station, and if they had a passenger, rather than make them walk that distance, they stopped again, just a few feet down the track for the junction.
You could see the J, part of the J, part of the U, where the sign said Rogers Point Junction.
Yeah.
Right there.
GCT, yeah. Now this is one of the sadder parts.
Oh, yes.
This was an accident on Pratt Street. 3 men were killed. It was February 5th, 1942. It was during the war. Was Francis Brennan, John Poirier, and Wilford Bertrand. There was a freight going across, and it was going very, very slow, and they just ran right into the side of it, killed the whole 3 of them.
They didn't get hit by the train. They hit the
No,
train.
they hit the train. Yeah.
It's very dark there. Probably wasn't enough light. That light maybe had been there the way you were talking about
Yeah,
there,
that
and there
little
wasn't
bitty-
much light, and you just don't see it.
No. So, and there was another accident on, I don't know the year, I should, but I'm not sure, on the D&H, between the overhead and the river. The passenger train coming in at night, and it was on a very cold night, and the rail broke, and the rail come right up through the coach floor, right in front of 2 nuns. And but nobody was hurt. And there was an awful lot of track damage and all. And at that time, Tom Myers was shop foreman, and Tellis Lefebvre was a crane operator. And they took the big crane out, and they went down. And then at that time, too, they had a food car. And they'd go down, they'd go to the store if there was a wreck within the area, then they'd buy all the supplies, and they'd go back and they'd load that food car, and that food car would go down the rail, too. Because when there was a wreck, nobody went home. If it was 24 hours or 30 hours, everybody stayed. And so they worked around the clock, but you'd go in the food car and get your food. They always had hot coffee and everything, and you'd go in there and you'd eat in there.
I guess if you're riding on a train, the last thing you expect for a problem will be something coming up out of the floor, right?
It broke and it just snapped, and it come right up
Right
through the car
Unbelievable.
floor. Yeah, right in the thing. So then you talked about a tower. We talked about a tower. I think you got a picture in one of in your books.
Yeah.
I don't know which page, but anyway, at the D&H crossing, there was a tower, and there was a ladder that the employee went up in that tower. The tower was 4 by 4, and it was 30 feet high. And the last tender that I know that worked that was Arthur Malinsky. That tower controlled the crossing gates at Pratt Street and at State Street. And that was taken down, and I don't think anyone ever thought to go there and take a picture of it until it was gone. And by then it was too late. But
I think I removed the picture, Pat.
maybe,
It
but
was in
anyway,
the other book.
in either the D&H or the Rutland book, if anyone's interested, there's a real good picture of a tower, and it shows you exactly what we're talking about. And that was taken down in 1963, that they took that down. There was another bad accident at 9B some years back. Again, 3 people were killed. There it is. There's your tower.
Yeah, I had it down below instead of up above.
There's what the tower looked like.
That's probably up in the air about 25.
That's not the Ross's Point one, but they were all made almost the same.
Superstructure with a, looks like at least a 6x6 or 6x8 room up there, and that's the tower.
So then there was another bad accident on 9B. Again, 3 young people killed, Betsy Prito, Joan Bennett, and Andre Nolette. The train was coming through and they were trying to cross at the same time, and that was it. The whole 3 of them were killed right there instantly.
There were a couple other in the car that were not...
There was Tommy Jefferson, and Mary Bender was driving the car. But Mary was hurt a bit, but nothing serious. But the other 3 were
late
killed.
40s, wasn't it?
I think
it
in
was
that,
late 40s
right
when,
around in that. I have it, but I didn't
tremendous
have time
blow,
to find...
tremendous blow.
Yeah.
If the train don't give way, then they don't always see
No.
them. They're going along and they
No,
don't see them.
That's it. That's it. And when I used to go to Plattsburgh when my kids were little, I'd fix the carriage and I'd walk up to the station with the baby carriage. And when I'd get to the station, the man, whoever was working the baggage car, would pick up my carriage and set it up in the baggage car. And I'd get on the coach and go to Plattsburgh. And when we get to Plattsburgh, I'd go back to the baggage car, and he'd take the carriage, put it back down on the sidewalk, and I'd go and do my shopping or whatever.
Now,
So this is just what would I say? Just they weren't getting paid or
Right.
nothing, just doing it as a favor.
right.
You know.
Now, there were benefits. Did you pay for that trip as an employee's wife?
No.
Wasn't it you had a pass or something,
Yeah.
huh?
Now this
there
is
we
my
go.
pass today.
I didn't know you were going to bring it up next, but she still has a pass, right?
Oh yes, I have a pass as long as I live.
It's like the railroad, the airlines. They give.
Well, it's different now than it used to be. Now this is a trip pass. This is my daughter's. Until you had 10 years on the railroad, you could have 1 trip pass a month. You could go anywhere on the D&H if you were an employee once a month, and it didn't cost you anything. But after you were there 10 years, you were given your permanent pass. If you were husband and wife, you each had your own pass to carry, and you rode anywhere the D&H went, cost you nothing. If you wanted to get off the D&H and go on the CN, it cost you half fare. Anyone would acknowledge the D&H pass, and you would pay half fare on another road. You could go anywhere in the United States or Canada. But then in later years, when Amtrak took over, and we got a new pass every year. So then when Amtrak took over, this is the pass we get now. Now that we don't take on the train. We always just showed our conductor the pass, and that was it. We don't do that anymore. You bring this in the station, and he has to have you sign a form to show that you have an Amtrak pass. But Amtrak still recognizes D&H passes. If you have it, they still acknowledge it, so you still don't pay.
Alice M. is not her daughter. In the
This is
phone
my
book,
daughter.
it will say, this is her daughter, Alice M. It will say that in the phone book. In parentheses, it says Peg. So Alice M. is Peg Barcomb right here.
I have to say that because there's an Alice M. that lives on Lily Avenue. We have the same initial and the same first name, and I've been known as Peg since I was born. But if I sign something like my pass or whatever, I've got to use my legal name, so I have to say it's Alice. But in the phone book, we're both Alice M. So I had them put Peg, because then if people look for Peg, well, they know when they see that, that's the right one. But I never use it. There's only 2 people that call me Alice, and that's Vernon Laundrie and Willard Aubry.
And,
and they never got over, that's always been.
right, we're going to take a short break. We're going to call those 2 people up on the phone right now and tell them to stop calling her Alice. And we're going to do that right now. We'll be right back after the phone call. We're back, and we're looking at, Peg tells me, another accident that took place in Rouse's Point at the Diamond.
At the Diamond.
Very bad. Other than that, there's not much information. It's just more pictures of railroading in, you're watching what's going on here, the third segment of this continuing series, mini-series on railroading. Very important aspect of the North Country, of all of the United States. Railroading is so interesting, and is, as a younger boy, and so many other boys, you know, and girls, I guess, ladies, they like railroading. It's in so many of the...
I haven't seen the other picture yet.
Oh, you haven't even seen it. There's so much in railroading that helped our country build across, and it moved all our merchandise until the trucks came in after the war. And this is a continuing history, and Peg is so good at this, and she's got so many interesting pictures, and she's going to get into the next one right now.
Well, before we enter another picture, I got to tell you that when my husband worked on a section, well, like 1942, 43 in there when he started, Louis Valencia was the section foreman, and he had 14 men, and their line was from the border to Chazy. That's all. And gradually, he was there 17 years, and gradually they pushed them, they had to go to Plattsburgh. Then they pushed them, they had to go to Port Kent. And then they started bumping. And when he got done, he had 17 years, and it might have been 17 days. There was no more job. So with 17 years rights, even then, everybody had more than that. So the railroad had just really, in such a short time, dropped right down to almost nothing.
Yep. Peg, tell us what you mean by section. What do you mean?
Well,
they're section gang. What do they do?
They were maintenance of way. They took care of the rails. Yes.
We didn't know what we said when we said M of W, maintenance of way. That means they're...
Yeah, they were the ones that kept the tracks, kept the trains rolling. They fixed broken rails. They repaired the road beds. They repaired any bridges or anything. They took care of the switches. All this was their job. And in the winter, if there was a big snowstorm, the men were out and they shoveled by hand. That's how you first heard of a cow catcher. I was telling you, my husband would be called out and he would ride the cow catcher and clean the switches. Now, for the switcher in the yard, when the switcher would get to a switch, he would get off with his broom, and on the end of the broom is a pick made on the end of the broom. Well, you'd use that pick to pick out the ice out of the switch. So then the brakeman could get off the engine and he could turn the switch. But they filled in so quick that they had to ride the engine until they were done switching, or until the storm was finished, one or the other. And he'd walk home. We had no car. He'd walk home down onto Rose Avenue, and in them days, all the section men wore felt shoes with buckle overshoes. And his overshoes buckles would be so frozen and so full of ice, and his pants frozen, that you had to thaw the buckles before you could get his overshoes off from him. But they worked it. They'd go out, every man that was called, they'd go and they'd work till the storm was finished. And in the summer, along the rails, it was always like 100 degrees in some of those days against that hot steel. And they'd work out there just the same, and the boss always made sure that every time they took a drink, they took some salt tablets. And they'd come home and they wore those pepper salt shirts, and the shirts would be pure white almost from the salt that would come out of their bodies. So it wasn't an easy job, and they didn't have trucks with wheels that they rode in a cab like they do today. They went out on a little flat car with no cab or nothing, and they ate their lunch out on the side of the rail wherever they were. And in the winter, their sandwiches would be frozen solid. They'd make a little bonfire and try to hold their sandwich over the smoke and fire to thaw them enough so they could eat them. But even in all the hardships and everything it was, he loved that job. And when he got laid off, he always said if he could have went back on the railroad, he loved it. So it took men like him that could stand things like that. You had to like it. If you didn't, you'd have quit long ago.
There's a company in Canada now that ships merchandise to the United States, and their name escapes me, because today you don't have men doing these things. You have automatic tamper machines that come down and tamper your ballast.
Yes.
You ride it rails and it does it all automatically. They have another one that goes down and takes X-ray and soundings of the track, and they can tell if something is loose or if a rail is starting to crack or break from the bottom. It's all done by a sounding. It makes a picture on a video screen like this, and they go along. They can tell exactly where it was when they review it later. All these things are replacing the men of railroad. And
the two hardest things for him to learn, one was to use a scythe. They had to cut all the brush on the sides of the track, and that was a little bit hard to learn. And the second hardest was two men each using a maul pounding spikes, and you each took your turn.
Yeah,
and
alternated.
if one didn't do it just right, somebody missed, there was trouble. That was kind of hard. You'd get used to one partner and you were all right, so they would team up. The two would work always generally the same two when they would pound spikes. But they didn't have much in the line of machines that did anything then. The men did it. It was all, they'd bring out a car filled with stone or whatever behind their cart, and that's what they did. They stayed right outside. But it was it's changed so much now. It's hard to believe
Yes.
that it's so different. So then, as I told you about the snowstorms and that, so now that I've got them, they're in the bottom here somewhere. I've got some RPO. There they are, I think. Yes. See the postmarks. Now, when the mail car would go through on every train and load all this mail, they had an RPO postmark. All the mail sacks were emptied while the train was moving. There was a man in the mail car, and he had just like a post office with pigeonholes and the whole bit. And he would empty the mail sacks, and he would stamp those letters with RPO, Railroad Post Office. Today, they're very collectible. If you buy a postcard for the postcard, and it has an RPO on the back, you pay double the price because you got the RPO.
for you younger people who wondered why they call this type of a card a penny postcard, and there it is right there. It's a penny postage. And that is dated 1908, and this is dated 1913 or 14. But they were using penny postcard, and it was penny postage.
Yeah.
Today they're 13 cents, right?
Yeah.
Or 15
But
on a
that,
postcard, I guess. And that's your RPO.
Yeah, the RPOs. So you don't find them too often, but people that collect stamps, it's interesting for them to watch for cards or something, with stamps.
Yeah.
And
There's room for another one in Rouse's Point. How about you? Again, Rouse's Point, and there's a picture of the old Rouse's Point Bridge, railway bridge in Rouse's Point, postcard, in addition to the postmark.
now some of the famous people that rode the trains through here, not all of them, but I picked up the ones I could think of offhand. FDR, Churchill, Truman, Eisenhower, Dion Quinterplitz. In fact, they got off the train and stood to have pictures taken. Prince Philip, King George, Queen Elizabeth, and the actress Fifi Dorsey. She come through to help to raise war bonds, just like Jack Dempsey did. So they were people that came up on the trains too and come through Ross's Point. Then during the Second World War, there was a lot of troop trains, and the troops coming through on the trains, with carloads of them. And when a troop train was coming, the section had to go and spike all the mainline switches. They'd spike them down so they couldn't be turned. And so no matter what other train wanted to come through, you could not use that line till the troop train passed. Then they had to go and pull the spikes and open the switches so they could use the regular track. But it was a precaution, and so they spiked all the main line. Now this is one picture I think goes with this one, I'm pretty sure. That was an ammunition train come through during the war, and a car wrecked right there at the Diamond. Now, when that everybody was so nervous because the ammunition was in steel boxes, but nobody really knew ammunition enough to know if it would blow up or what it would do. So those men worked in total silence. Now, the man in that picture is George Merrill.
Standing up here?
Yes.
Yes.
And Merrill Mitchell, Sam Barton, Tom Myers, Arthur Brothers, Alfred Lavoie. And my husband was working there too, but there was a lot of the section men you didn't see, but that's who was in the picture. But they had to transfer all that from that car to another car And it was a frightening, they were all so nervous because nobody knew, as I say, what the ammunition would do, if it would blow up on them or
Just some of
what.
the cargo down here.
Yeah,
You can
that's
see
the
some of the boxes
transferring
down
it.
here,
Yeah,
down below.
yeah, they're transferring that.
I hope they took it, they told them to take a picture of the flash went off without them knowing it.
I guess this was at night here, yeah, you get down to at night.
Yes, yeah.
One man with a tie, he wasn't working as much. The third from the right, you had told me who was this man here?
That's Tom Myers.
That's Tom Myers.
That
Oh,
was
that,
the
oh.
foreman. He
Okay.
was the foreman, yeah. All right, now this one, again, is at the diamond, and I better tell you what the diamond is.
All right, we're going to hit a diamond now. Come back, folks. There's the diamond.
The diamond was where the Rutland and the D&H tracks crossed, and it was just beyond Mrs. Bovin's restaurant. The Rutland came up from the lake and went towards Malone, and the D&H crossed and went towards the border. So the Rutland, they had signals. Whoever was going to use the diamond had their signal. And if the Rutland was coming through with a real big train, it was very hard for them to stop because they had that grade to make. And if they had a long freight, it was very hard for them to make the grade. And so sometimes that's when there was an accident because the Rutland would figure, well, if they made it to the diamond first, they'd claim it. And sometimes the D&H had the light for it. So that's what caused some of the
Oh, that's where the accident took
yeah,
place.
sometimes,
All right.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
you'll notice one thing that you should know if you're talking about railroads and trains, each car may not belong to the D&H. They're only pulling them. This is a Union Pacific car, and this is a different car. I can't tell what it is. And they're leased, so to speak, to the D&H for that part of the trip. And then they'll be switched to another railroad when they leave there and go into the Boston Central or
All the
something else.
railroad is responsible for is to get it to its destination.
Which might be another railroad, right?
Could be, yes. They bring it to their destination. Now, the people in that picture
Okay.
is Jack Obrey and Joseph Bernard, Harry Murilli, Arthur Malinsky, and Jimmy Manette that I told you sold candy on the train.
Mm-hmm. You'll notice the trucks, the cars are right off the trucks here. They just went flying. And it's got to take a few hours. Here comes an engine down here. It looks like this is west. Looks like the east is behind us. You can see all the other houses up here in the village of Rouse's Point.
And about 55 years ago, Clarence Roberts was working, well, he was a D&H man, but he was off duty, and he went to cross the railroad tracks. I think the State Street crossing, I'm not sure of that, State Street or Chapman. And he got hit by the train, his legs got both cut off.
Oh.
And they loaded him in the train because then there was no ambulance to rush you to the hospital. They loaded him in the train, and they backed the train all the way to Plattsburgh and to try to save his life, but they couldn't do it.
Someone walking across the track, there's very little reason for an accident like that, Peg, when you look right down to it.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think you mentioned to me, someone mentioned to me how you used to cross between cars, huh?
You always think you got enough time, and this is how these things happen.
No, I mean,
you
it's
don't-
just
people
uncalled
don't-
for.
No,
That's not an
no,
accident.
A
It's
lot of this doesn't have to happen.
No,
but
that's an
it
occurrence,
did.
not an
It
accident.
did.
Accidents
Yeah.
can be avoided,
Yeah.
then, thing like that.
And there's been
Terrible.
several strikes on the D&H, but the biggest one was the 6th of June in 1922. Jack Rasco called me a couple of weeks ago and asked me when that strike was, so I had to do some searching to find it, but I found it for him. There was 4,000 workers on the D&H, the whole line at that time, in the motive and car department. And out of 4,000, everyone went on strike except 260. So that's a pretty full strike.
Pretty well stopped the vehicle,
pretty well.
all the trains.
Yeah. But at that time, they were fighting, they wanted more wages. In 1917, these engineers in the car department were getting 33 cents an hour. And in 1922, when they went on strike, they were getting 70. But President Laurie was getting 100,000. So they all went on strike,
Yeah.
and but that was one of the reasons for it. So the passenger trains on the D&H stopped in 1971. And this is the Laurentian, the last passenger train. And that is Stanley Chapman, who was the engineer. I had that picture made like that.
Talking about the Laurentian, I want to just mention this, that there is a little booklet. I didn't know when I was going to do this. There is a little booklet called the Laurentian. It's been reprinted in the last couple, 3 years. It talks about the various stops as they leave Albany coming north. There's some maps along the lake and some drawings and so forth. And these are available. I was given 10 or 12 when I was in the station the other day. And if you want one of these, I think if you wrote to the station here, maybe, or in Albany, or Saratoga, or stop in at the station and talk to Ray Beaumier, or the yardmaster is Dennis Longton. I'm sure they'd be glad to give you one if you want one for your records. And I say that with reservation, but I was told he has a whole box full. Nice little booklet, 15, 18 pages.
So the 15th of August, 1974, Amtrak came into the picture. And the first run of Amtrak, this is the greeting they got. Now the first run, the engine changed from the old passenger train was the Laurentian. The Amtrak passenger train is the Adirondack. Now, I was invited by the president to come up from Whitehall to ride this train, but I didn't go that far. I got on at Westport, and I came up, and he was the engineer. And
the president was the engineer?
Yeah, he was the engineer. And when we got to Ross's Point, there was all this people there, and the Straw Hatters were playing and all. So I went up to the engine, and when he got off, I talked to them a little bit, and I left, and he circled the whole crowd. He was that kind of a man. He didn't like the publicity, but he was a very good president. He circled the whole crowd, and he went down around the crossings and shook hands with all of his employees, and none of his employees knew who he was. He shook hands and told them they did such a great job, and they were all in a uniform, and they were all clean and looking nice. And one of them was Bobby Anthony, and he didn't know, and most of the boys didn't know who that man was. And then he came over to my car, and we talked for a while, and then I left, and he left. But he didn't get into the crowd or didn't take any credit or nothing. He just stayed right in the background. That's why the men all liked him, because the way he was.
You're up to 1976 here.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to talk at all about the sesquicentennial in 73? You got anything in your records?
I've got, but I don't think...
Okay, the reason I ask you, because you're up to 76, in 1973, there was a large crowd like this at the Pratt when one of the other D&H cars came up, and a lot of the old employees came back.
Oh, what you're talking about, I think, is when the excursion train came.
Yes.
Yeah. On this one other thing, Sparky came up.
Oh, okay, is Sparky on this one?
He worked again.
Okay.
He had retired after 55 years, but he came back and worked that run. He was all in his white coat and all, and he worked the diner.
Okay.
In the they didn't have a diner on it. They had just, you could get a drink or something on that initial run. And Sparky worked it.
I've got a picture here, I think, of Sparky. Be right back. Let me check it. I'll be right back to you. I do not have the picture that I thought I had of Sparky to show you, but suffice it to say that one of the most popular people in this whole crowd and in that whole trip was Sparky. Yeah. Joe Sparks from Albany, worked in the dining car and stayed at the Holland 2 or 3 nights a week for many, many years, and a friend to everybody in the Rogers Point area.
Loved him.
And we've lost poor Sparky last year, or a year ago this past February, and he used to come up here every sportsman's dinner, never missed
barbecue
it.
On the
and
pier.
We would be no history of D&H would be right without Sparky.
This is just one of the souvenirs that when we came in on the Adirondack, everybody on the train we were given mugs and we were given this, and everyone come out with a shopping bag full of souvenirs that they gave us. The men were given little shaving sets that said Amtrak and so on, but I just brought one thing just to show you what they did. So then the D&H ended up selling the railroad to Timmy Mellon, which was the last downfall of the whole railroad. When they sold it to him, then it just went downhill since. There's been nothing good for that since. So now they've gone into bankruptcy, and it's being sold. Most likely CP is going to get it because they've been trying for a long time, and they've got nearly everything, all the complications out, and so they think they are going to have it. But now they're putting up some of the land and the buildings and things in the village. They're putting up for sale. So where it's going to go from there is going to be anybody's guess. Nobody knows what else is going to happen. So I guess some other things I'll show you. This is the elephant ear engine, and you can see why it's called elephant ear. the big, at the front, you see that was called elephant ear.
That's the long, here you've got may I read it for you? A 4, 8, 4, if you were talking about this locomotive, how it's identified by the wheels. 4 big drive wheels on each side. 8 dual purpose locomotive. There it is right there. 484. By golly, just like I said. I've learned something on this long expedition we've had, Peg.
Now this is the wreck of number 9, which was a sleeper in Ross's Point, but I don't know when. I don't know when it was.
Lying on its side. The number of the locomotive was the 604, but it's known as number 9. Number 9 is they call
the
it
Montreal sleeper.
sleeper that went north, and I don't know if anybody got hurt. Now you can see some of the trucks that are off and out of the way.
This is another wreck on the D&H, but it by what's the clothes and everything of the people, it had to be around the turn of the century or before.
Yes, you can
and
see.
Wooden car.
Wooden car, the mustache on the people. Another wreck. Remember that it's not someone's negligence in most cases. It's because there's snow that's piled up. And the train not being as heavy, some of these are not loaded. They go up on top and they turn over.
And this is the Sharks. These were called the shark nose engines. There's a big story on the back of it I won't go into, but there was only 2 of them left, and the engineers up here didn't like them. I don't remember the reasoning, but Tom Rosenberger probably can tell you that. But they were called the Sharks. They call that engine.
Now this engine will go either way, correct? This the front. Are they both here? You're saying?
Yeah, that's
Okay, so it can go. The train, they don't after they have the turnarounds anymore, the turntables. They can just back up now, much different than what they did, and they also go off onto a Y siding, I'm told, and go back in the same direction. The Sharks.
Now this is another bunch of local men.
Some more people. I recognize at least one at first glance.
The first one is Joe Bruno and Harry Landry, and in the back is John Fournier, then Tom Kemp, Leo O'Connor, Harold York, and then I don't know, and Dave Ross, Earl Merchant, Hank Jolson, and Lyman Beeman.
What year was that?
I don't know. I
Can't
don't really
tell
know.
from here.
I would say in the 60s. I would guess in the 60s. I think some of these men died in the 60s.
Hank Jolson, of course, from the Holland Hotel, and Lyman Beeman. And then, of course, Harry Landry. We're going to be talking with Harry Landry before this series is over. And he's going to tell us some of the stories that took place.
Want to go to the next one?
Yep.
All right, this is a bunch of the railroad union men in Ross's Point. Now, in the back, you got Tellis Lefebvre. He was the crane operator. You got Sanford Gooley. He worked in the North Yard. You got Ray Ladd, Ralph Briette, Francis Gibo, Casper Muller, Malcolm Batchelder, and in the middle you got Pete Yell, Fred Roberts, Jay Sartwell, Clement Aubry, Fred Duquette, Joe Barcomb, Bob Thompson, Tony Gallagher, Teddy Hebert, Harris Willett, and in the front you got George Miro, Arthur Brothers, and that's a Mr. Fish from Whitehall. He was one of the union men. Then you got Alan Hunter, who was the union representative in Ross's Point, Mr. Shattock and a Mr. McKnight, who were union men, and Wilfred Kuchar.
One person was covered.
I guess I got the man in the back. I must have lost one along the way here. I lost one in somewhere along here. I must have got out of step in the
which
middle
row?
row.
Middle row?
Well, I ran out of this last man. The last man on the end here is... that's on the...
It's in the middle. Teddy Hebert.
I think I missed one along the way. I thought he was going to be part of the front row, but That's all right.
Well, anyway,
They'll
someone
see
will-
his pictures, and we
Yes,
have the
they'll-
name along here somewhere.
In that many pictures, it's hard to
Yes,
follow
very
with a
much, yes, to
pencil.
follow,
I mean,
exactly.
you know, so you've done good.
All right.
All right, so now I'll show, this was, as I said, we had Grand Trunk Railroad here and CN. So this is just to show you the size of their timetable that they
A
had.
timetable is your schedule of the trains coming in and out of their various locations.
That was-
in all directions, and that's
That's ones that came through, CN came through here and so on. So
September
that's,
29th, 1946. These are not issued once a year. They're issued numerous times, right?
and this is the Grand Trunk office, which again was a little office that was near the Rouse's Point Junction. See, it was all full of little buildings down there, and each one was a different railroad somewhere along the way.
That's the railroad center
Yeah.
for the Grand Trunk.
This is the Grand Trunk engine.
That's an old steam engine.
This is 3 D&H menus. Now, every time they put out a menu, they had a new pretty cover. It's just always they put their map on the back to show their route,
That's
and the
awesome.
inside was what they had and their prices and so
Right.
on. So it's 3 different times, but that was the menus.
The Ostable Chasm, and here's Fort Ticonderoga. All right, and to show you, this is the inside of their menu. What you would have, relishes, the hors d'oeuvres, fish, soups, the table d'hôtel, and the plate luncheon, etc.
Is it prices? Or
Prices here, $1.75 per person for the plate luncheon, $2.75 for the table d'hors, and that was, don't have a date.
They don't date them, no.
They don't do that way. They don't know for sure.
Black
this
and
is
white
probably
one is the oldest one, of course.
this is probably the more current. Broil minute sirloin steak $3.50. Grilled fish, fresh fish $2.60.
This was my 1976 Christmas card from Bruce Sturzing. And you see, again, how they
President of-
use the cards. They always use an engine, and
The D&H engine and Carl Sturzing. There is a company that sells a lot of train cards, and I don't have their name in front of me. They got a lot of engines, and Floyd LaFountain always sends us one. And
I bought from them one year.
Leaning Tree, that's it.
I bought from them one year, but I found it more fun to take one of your own favorite
Oh, I'm
railroad
sure,
pictures,
yes.
and Larry does. Larry Marnes always has one made too, and it's a special of his engines. This is just another Delaware and Hudson Railway Corporation, a canal company bill of some sort, 1888.
Northern Railroad Department, 1888. Total $16.23 on it. Just some more old writing, excellent writing, and so forth.
Now, this is the 1923 D&H timetable. That's a public timetable again.
Saratoga Springs, Adirondacks, Lake George, Lake Champlain, and Montreal. Corrected to November 4th, 1923.
This is 1945, but what I want you to notice here was, look, Eastern Wartime.
Oh, yes. Timetable effective June 17, 1945. The route of the famous Montreal Limited in Eastern Wartime, which is another way of saying daylight saving time. That's when it started, I think, during the war. Eastern Wartime.
And this is the D&H employee timetable, 1969.
Right. Remember we talked before with the Rutland where they had both the employees and the public. This is the employee, 1969. Again, the timetables are made up a little bit different than the other.
Now you see, this is the Rouse's Point Dock and Coal Company. It's just on anthracite coal from the D&H, and they printed up these and gave them to people.
The Hudson Coal Company, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Rouse's Point Coal and Supply, now owned by Eddie Bayshard, right on Lake Street. Show them drilling for coal.
And this was
Oh,
another...
the famous old Dock and Coal anthracite blotters. Many people today, many of the younger people in the 30s and lower don't know what a blotter is.
No.
and that's when you use real ink and a real pen and not a
I
ballpoint.
think that one is Moore's.
And they used it a lot, A.E. Priest, and there's your blotter. And you'd write, and so it wouldn't, you just put it down and you'd rub it, and they used to give these away for elections. Did you ever give any of these away? Lester Hamilton here, giving those with your picture on, Lester?
Yes.
Order D&H anthracite. It's a way of advertising.
And that's Strong and Casey, and that was before Dock and Cole.
Yes. Strong and Casey Coal Company, I have in my house as an antique piece. I have their original old house scale, and that was Dave Strong's father and young Bob Casey's father, Bob Casey Sr. and Mr. Strong.
This is just a packet that when we came up on the Adirondack, this was another thing they gave us on the train. It's a little outlay of, tells the history of the D&H, and then my little booklet is different than yours.
Yes.
And the contents is different too, but this is what was in this packet. And this was the first timetable that was used to come up here.
Okay.
So, there was other things in here that I've taken out.
Well, this is now yours, Peg. I've got some other I'm going to give Calvin. Did I give you one yet?
Very good.
That's
Thank
yours.
you.
That's yours. I'll
Thank
courtesy
you.
of Mr. Ray Beaumier. And
So that's what we've got here. So now if we stand up and we can go and cover the rest of it.
okay, we'll take a break and we'll get to another location. We've got a few more minutes here, and then we'll be right back. What you've been seeing, many of those pictures that you've been seeing today, took place in this little section right in here, but you wouldn't recognize it. A blueprint of the railway yards in Rouse's Point.
This is in 1916. I've got a lot of D&H ones too that Alfred Gaines gave me, but there's just, I brought one just to give you an idea of what the blueprints of the railroads looked like.
100 feet to 1 inch, if you were wondering here, all right?
Now this one, this starts out going over the bridge. Here is Sportsman's Pier.
And remember, that's where the hotel was, right?
Yes, this is where the hotel was. So that you see how many tracks there was. There was several railroads. But the first we talked about, I told you I would show you where the engine house and the was. Well, this is it. There's the turntable, and here's your engine house. Now this is, here's, you see it's Canada Street, but that's Lake Street.
It was on the other side of
Yes.
Lake Street. I didn't
Yes.
realize that. I
This is what
misunderstood.
today is Lake Street,
Right?
but it was Canada Street. Now here's where that water tank I showed you on the road. Right there.
Yes.
So this, Delegars would be actually right here.
Correct.
Would be Delegars. So right near the track was the roundhouse, and you see they could back out onto the main line again.
Right.
So that was there. Now, then we talked about the railroad that started at the station, went out in the water. Right here was the big brick O&LC depot.
Right.
It started there, it crossed Canada Street, and it went down, this is Montgomery, State Street, hooks
Right.
into Montgomery. This is the big Menard block right behind the Holland House. It just skipped the end of that block, and it crossed over, and it went in the water. And then it followed the water right up here to this wharf, which is up to Leonard's Wharf.
So in here it was awfully close to the liquor store area. Is
Yes,
that right?
yes, it was crossing right along in there and going over to the back.
Unbelievable.
Now, an attorney, J.B. Stearns, had a little office on Pratt Street, right where the parking cars, there's a car dealership right there now. Well, he had a little office right there, and he wrote the story up because they had found pieces of rail and so on, and he was able to write the whole story as to where that railroad went. So that's how we knew exactly between where and so on, and he told how it just skipped the corner of that was the laundry block at that time. Now it's the Menard block, and it was Mr. Stearns that wrote it up.
Very interesting to note these wharfs here too. Remember when the other stories that Peg talked to us when we were talking about the Anchorage and the Saxony, and there's the
This is the Booth Lumber Wharf, when I told about
And we
the
saw many pictures,
Millards
yes.
and the lumber company.
Right.
Well, this was Millard's Wharf, built right over the water, and that was where they stored their lumber. I showed you pictures of those
exactly,
things.
absolutely.
And this was the old Chapman block, built by Albert Chapman. It was on the corner of Lake and Chapman Street, and the custom house was in there.
This
There
is the
was
Village
also-
Park right here, right?
Yes,
At this other corner.
That's Rouse Park.
Okay, Rouse Park here, and that's
Yes,
where right on the
yes.
corner.
And there's a hardware store there
Hardware
now.
store is there.
Customs was in that building, post office was in that building, Knights of Columbus was in there. There was a beauty shop in there. There was a candy store. There was an ice cream parlor. Over the years, many, many things were in that big building. But that burned down too. And Vernon Laundry was living upstairs in that building at that time. So then you got State Street and you got up Canada Street. And Canada Street, of course, became Lake Street. They changed it. I have the year, but I don't remember. Now here would be the Ross's Point Fire Station, right here. So here is the road that goes behind the fire station. The depot, as you see, was about 6 feet from that road. That road was the original road. They've just improved it. And the road went right on through, and you could go down to the D&H on that road.
Which is down here.
Yeah. So you had your immigration office, which wasn't built in this picture. And you had your Rutland freight shed, and then here all your things again, and here's your diamond.
All right, there's our famous diamond. This is on the main route of the D&H, correct?
Yes, yes. Now here's your station, and you got Beauvin's restaurant, and so on right along here. And then there was your diamond, where they crossed. Now this building, I think, is Bob Cronkrite's grandfather's, because in the stories it tells that the building was moved by Mr. Cronkrite from near the track. So I think it was this building, but I'm not sure of that. And they had another roundhouse down here. They turned trains down here too. So you see
That was, okay, that's
shows
north.
you how busy this place
Okay.
was.
Now, we want to remind you that every time you see a Y like this, the only way you can get those trains to go from going this way to go to this way is to throw a switch. And later on in our series, we're going to show you outside a switch. We're in this area right in here, right about in here, or maybe way even out here later on. And it will also talk about the Millard Lumber Company that Peg brought up to us when we talked about the Saxony and the Anchorage, right?
We did that when we did the Anchorage.
And she was telling us how they used to own a bridge right over the top of the railroad, if you watched in that series.
Yeah.
And this goes on to Moore's.
Yeah.
This goes up into Canada.
So that's it for the blueprint.
And you said you have more like this also?
Oh, I've got a lot of them, but I just brought one
Done
that
there that
showed
shows
the,
exactly.
the pier and the
you know,
most important for now.
In Champlain also, Oak Street, what is now Oak Street, going up toward Canada, was at one time was known as Canada Street. I believe that was Canada. They all had different names. The names have changed over the years. We're going to go over and look at some mementos, some hard items right now. Stay right with us, please. You're watching What's Going On Here? This is Peg Barcomb. You must know her now. She's been here for the third week, and we've had her busy. We've had her busy, and she's done a great job. We want to thank you very much, Peg, before we go over into the hard items and all this work that you've done. I know you love it. I know you've taken a lot of time writing these notes down. A lot of it's up here and in your different things, but you've put them in some kind of a logical order for us. Wow. Calvin is behind the, cast iron is behind the camera. You're watching What's Going On Here. This is the third Sunday night. It's every Sunday night you watch What's Going On Here, unless we're superseded by something else. Some more memorabilia that Peg has brought with us, and starting up with on your left, Peg.
Well, this is the Souvenir Industrial Edition of Plattsburgh. It's a reprint, and it's still available, and there's some beautiful pictures of the station in Plattsburgh, and there's lovely pictures all through this. So people that like old history of the area, this is still available at the corner bookstore, and it's not that expensive. It's really
right. They've been yes, I think it's under $10 now. I think with the paper. We've some hard covers, and stop in and see Nancy and pick one of those up. Tell her we sent you down.
And this is Shaughnessy's D&H book, which Bob has been showing you. This one, I don't know if it's still available or not, this one here. This is a more modern D&H. It's all diesel, no steam in here. This, too, I don't know if it's still available. I've had mine from when it first came out, but I don't see it advertised. But again, sometimes if you contact a bookseller, they've got them.
I know if you want to see this Delaware and Hudson and the Rutland, I know at least our Champlain library have it. I've talked to Nancy in there, maybe some of the other libraries at Shazy, Moore's, and Rouse's Point may also have copies. If not, they can get it for you, I'm sure.
Now this is just my own personal, when you get into railroading, you have to get into all the phases of it.
Look at the stamps.
This is strictly railroad stamps from all countries of the world. They're nothing but trains, and I have them from wherever they're issued, I get them.
Make it a point, you don't collect stamps.
No.
Just railroad
only
stamps.
Railroad. A railroad stamp collector sent me this, already fixed like this, 20 railroad trains on a card, just the way he did his.
Mostly Polish.
They're all different countries. I mean, if you were to go through, there's United States, there's Canada, there's all different countries. There's China. But this is just another phase of collecting.
Yes.
So when I get in collecting, I don't like model trains, but real things I like. Now this, Bob called this a wick.
And it's not a wick.
I had told him it was a torch, but he forgot. But anyway, this is one of the real old, early D&H torches. Now this is a later one, but you see this opened up, and you see it's full of little wicks in there. Now there was kerosene put in here along with these wicks. And when the train stopped at the station, the engineer got off the train and he walked all around his train, and he lit this, and he used this as his light to examine the drivers and everything of his train while it was in the station. Now this one belonged to Melvin Boatwright of Rouse's Point. Each engineer bought their own, and so if they wanted to put their name in it, they did. Now, Melvin Boatwright years later had a garage right where Harrison's drugstore is today.
The only thing he doesn't have is a date. He's got his name and his ad. It'd be nice to have a date on those.
Well, I have the date he died, but it's in my notes over there. This is a book I got yesterday. Bob showed you a bit already. Anyone is interested in good reading and local reading, write to this man and send $2 for his book. And it's well worth it. He has posters, he has everything about the Adirondacks, lots of railroad things, like one that he has in there now, if I can find it. Yeah, this Nibsky, he's been to my house, and we've talked railroad, and he did on the Rutland, and it's all many pictures and diagrams and everything of the Ogdensburg and Lake Champlain Division. Now this is for sale down there. The Rutland is for sale, this one. D&H, he doesn't have it listed, but he may still have a copy or two if anyone was interested. This is Herd History, which again is still available through this same man. There's some about railroads in here, but it covers all the little towns and everything in Franklin and Clinton County.
Some of those may be available also at the Clinton County Museum in Plattsburgh.
It's a reprint, but I'm happy to have a reprint. There's so much information in there that it's well worth it.
All indexed with all family names in the back, too. Yeah. It took a long time.
This was put out, it's Holcomb and Brousseau, and it's the engineer's time book. When you went in the store, any of the railroad men, they gave these to them, and they kept their time in there. They'd write their hours and so on, but that's just a railroad. This belonged to Warren Palmer's father, and Warren gave it to me. That's just what they put on the side of a boxcar.
Imported merchandise, 2 years imprisonment. They tell you don't fool with the car. It must be delivered to the chief customs.
That's
they put
when
it on
they
before
sealed it.
When they sealed it.
The car.
It's got to come into the United States. You've seen this book?
Seen that. This is a I can't pick it up. That's a Sturbridge Lion again, and it's a paperweight. It's one of the things that they had promotional every so often, and they'd sell items, and this is one of the items that they would sell at that time. And these I brought to show the difference in the writing. Now the old D&H was block letters until they went to the script, and then they went into the script letters.
You can see
the difference in the writing. In the way they did it.
Locks they used with various buildings and so forth, and they all got their name on them, and they had the keys.
This again, this was wrote by Bob Jones, and it's one of 6 volumes. And it carries, covers all the CV from when it was on this side of the lake, all through Vermont, and this is new out a couple of years. But there's 6 volumes. This is available. If someone was interested, I could tell them how to get it. This is a caboose stove shovel, and I wouldn't have any idea what it weighs, but...
It's got to weigh, I would say, between 3 and 4 pounds, maybe 3 to 5 pounds even.
But it's good solid iron, but you see they had their D&H right in the middle of it.
Use it in the caboose to shovel the coal into their...
Yeah. And this is a ticket dater, which again must weigh 3 pounds. This one, you can change the date, and there's the die. It's bottom side up, but it says Rutland Railroad, Rouse's Point, New York, and you set the date in the middle here with all these buttons and gadgets and things. You could set the date the morning you went into the station. These 2 buttons changes your ribbon, like a typewriter ribbon.
The ribbon is right here in the middle.
Yeah. And that would stamp. That would stamp your tickets. But that stayed on the desk, and you can see it's had a lot of pounding. It's worn right down. This, I left the shade at home, but it's just the Sturbridge Lion again. And D&H had just a few of these made up and sold to their employees. And my brother-in-law got me this one in Albany. I don't think they got up this far, because as far as I know, I'm the only one in this area that got one. So
The Sturbridge Lion, of course, is that engine itself. It's the one that she had to stamp on way back, and the one that Tom Rosenberger made a replica. 3 or 4 or 5 foot replica of.
So that's my part of it.
All right, the last thing we will show you here, just before Peg leaves, she's got to go off, is this picture that was in the Plattsburgh paper. That was in the paper of November the 16th, just 2 weeks ago, and it shows the area in Rouse's Point with the lines across that the D&H said they're going to sell. And the D&H moves to sell the rail yard in Rouse's Point. There's the roundhouse and some of the other buildings and so forth in Rouse's Point. And at this point, the state has first option to buy that land. They can give their option to the county in next in order. We were talking with Leo Letourneau, and he said next in order would be the town of Champlain. And if the town don't want it, then the next in line to buy it would be the village of Rouse's Point. Except that if any railroad wanted to buy any part of it, they get first choice, even ahead of the state. We're going to be talking more about that later with some of these people. We're going to talk to Arthur Bowker. We're going to try and talk to Leo, and maybe things will have developed more by that time. At this time, we're going to say, we got something on your lapel here, Peg. What is that?
Well, that's a golden spike. 1869, 1969, when they had the anniversary, another railroad friend of mine went out where the golden spike was, where they pounded it, and this was a souvenir they sold, so he brought it back to me.
That's the type of things that holds the track with the, what do you call that little plate? The little
tie plate.
Tie plate, and it holds that, and it holds your track to exactly the right gauge, the width. We want to thank you again, Peg. I can't thank you enough. The longest program we've ever had with Peg Barcomb in her 3rd week, and it's only three of about 5 we'll have on railroads.
I hope I did it well enough that it pleases other people.
I'm sure you'll hear a lot, and you hear what she just said. If she pleased you, let her know, please. She'll answer that phone to her. When you see her on the street, tell her how well she did, and not only the knowledge, but you come across so well with it, Peg, and you enjoy it, and that makes me feel good.
I do.
Makes me feel good. I don't feel like I've held you up at all. I know you like to do this,
the
and I know.
railroad I like.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for watching Hometown Cable every night. And particularly, I'm going to ask you to watch every Sunday night for our program called What's Going On Here. I'm Bob Venn. This is Peg Barcomb, who's been our guest today for over 6 hours, making up 3 different programs, and you'll see them consecutively. And stay tuned, and you'll know when we're going to have more programs. Every Sunday night, 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 1 a.m., and then that show on early Monday morning at 9 a.m. Watch a couple of them. It don't change, but watch them anyway. Thanks a lot. Hi, you're watching a promotion here for what's going on here for this coming Sunday night, and this lady here is not trying to steal anything from us. That's Peg Barcomb, and she's loading up all her various items she had brought here to the town garage to give a demonstration for you and all the people who are watching Hometown Cable. This is our 3rd session, and she's loading up all her goodies to take off to another location. We hope you'll tune in this coming Sunday night at 5 o'clock, at 8 o'clock, 1 a.m. in the morning, and find out what this is I got in my hand here. I call it a wick, she calls it a torch. And you'll see what that's all about, and you'll see that this coming Sunday night. Tune in, please. Bob Venn wishing you a very happy holidays, and hope you enjoy watching our show. And don't forget to watch all this series on railroading in the North Country, in the Northern Tier.